The first time she asked if I wanted to stay the night, it didn't feel like a simple question. It felt like a line. One I wasn't sure I could step back from once I crossed it. Her voice was calm, almost casual, like she was asking something ordinary. But there was a quiet weight behind it, something unspoken that pressed against my chest and made it hard to breathe normally. Outside, the storm raged without pause. Rain hammered against the windows, wind rattled the frames, and every distant rumble of thunder made the room feel smaller, more closed in. Behind me, the couch had already been prepared. Neat, straight, ready. Like the decision had been made before I even realized I had a choice. Emma Lane stood a few steps away in the soft light of her living room. She wore a simple sweater, nothing special, but on her it felt different, like everything about her carried intention, even when she tried to make it seem effortless. There was a small smile on her lips, careful and controlled, but it didn't quite hide what was underneath. She was watching me. Waiting. "Do you want to stay here tonight?" she asked. Just like that. No pressure, no explanation. But my mind didn't hear it as something simple. Because I knew if I said yes, something between us would shift. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in a way we could name right away, but it would happen. The space we had carefully kept, boss and employee, mentor and mentee, safe and defined, wouldn't stay the same. And the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted it to. My heart was beating too fast, loud enough that I was certain she could hear it. Every second stretched longer than it should have, the silence between us growing heavier, filled with everything we weren't saying. I looked at her. Really looked. At the way she stood there like this didn't matter, while somehow feeling like it mattered more than anything. And in that moment, I realized something that made the decision even harder. I didn't want this to stay simple anymore. My name is Alex Taylor. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a software engineer at a tech company in Portland, Oregon. Most of my life exists behind a screen. Lines of code, endless tasks, bugs that never seem to fully disappear, just change shape and come back when you least expect them. My days are structured around deadlines and deployments, measured in commits and fixes rather than anything that feels real. Headphones on, eyes locked on glowing monitors, hours passing without notice. That's the routine. The office itself doesn't help. Grey walls, too bright lights, rows of identical desks filled with people who all look equally drained. It's the kind of place that never truly rests. There's always something running, something breaking, something that needs attention. Even when it's quiet, there's this constant hum in the background, like the building itself is awake when everyone else wishes they were. Some days it feels less like a workplace and more like a machine. And we're just parts of it. Conversations are short, mostly functional. Quick updates, status checks, small talk that never goes anywhere. People come in, do their work, and leave as soon as they can. No one lingers unless they have to. I used to do the same. Keep my head down, do the job, don't think too much about anything outside of it. It was easier that way. Cleaner. Predictable. Because in a place like that, anything personal, anything real, feels out of place. Like it doesn't belong. At least that's what I thought at first. Until her. Emma was the exception. From the beginning, she stood out in a way that was hard to explain but impossible to ignore. She was my team lead, 30 years old, sharp-minded, quick with decisions, and always 2 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. In an environment where most people slowly burned out, she somehow held herself together without becoming cold or distant. She was efficient, yes, demanding when she needed to be, but never unfair. That was rare. When I joined the company 3 years ago, she was the one assigned to train me. I remember walking into my first week expecting the usual: impatience, judgment, that subtle pressure that makes you feel like you're already behind. But she wasn't like that. The first time I asked what I thought was a stupid question, I braced myself for it. That pause, that look people give when they're deciding how to respond without sounding annoyed. It never came. Instead, she explained everything clearly, like the question actually mattered, like I mattered. And that set the tone for everything that followed. When builds failed late at night, and they always did at the worst times, she didn't panic. She didn't snap at anyone. She stayed calm, focused, sometimes even making a quiet joke just to ease the tension. It worked. People relaxed around her, thought more clearly, did better. She had this way of keeping things under control, without making anyone feel small in the process. And then there were the small things. The ones no one talks about. The nights I got so caught up in work that I forgot to eat, until I'd suddenly find a granola bar or a cup of coffee sitting on my desk. No comment, no attention drawn to it. Just there. Like she noticed everything without making it obvious. Somewhere between late-night deployments, rushed coffee breaks, and conversations that stretched just a little longer than they needed to, something shifted. She stopped being just my team lead. Then just my mentor. And without me even realizing when it happened. She became the person I trusted most. The one I looked for without thinking when I walked into a room. The one whose opinion mattered more than it should have. The one who made that grey, exhausting place feel human. And maybe that was where the problem started. Because once someone becomes that important, they stop being simple. That should have been enough. At least that's what I kept telling myself. There was a clear line between us, one that made everything simple, safe, and easy to explain. She was my boss, my mentor, the person who made a difficult job feel manageable. That was the role she was supposed to have in my life, and for a long time I tried to keep it exactly that way. I told myself not to overthink things. Not to read into the way she smiled sometimes, like there was something more behind it. Not to notice how conversations with her felt different, longer, easier, more real than anything I had with anyone else at work. Not to pay attention to how naturally we fell into step with each other, like we had been doing it for years. I kept everything in the right place. Or at least I tried to. Because the truth was, the more time I spent around her, the harder it became to ignore what was changing. It wasn't sudden, it didn't happen all at once. It built slowly, quietly, hidden inside small moments that didn't seem important at the time. The way I started looking for her without realizing it. The way her opinion stayed with me longer than anyone else. The way a simple good job from her meant more than it should have. None of it made sense if I thought about it logically. So I stopped trying to. Instead, I held onto the version of things that felt safe. She's just your boss. Just your mentor. Just someone you trust. Nothing more. I repeated it enough times that it almost sounded true. Almost. Because no matter how many times I told myself that story, there was something underneath it that refused to stay quiet. Something that didn't care about boundaries or logic or consequences. Something that kept pulling me just a little closer every time I tried to step back. And deep down, whether I wanted to admit it or not, I had already crossed the line long before that night. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. That Friday, the air had felt heavy from the moment the day began. Not just cloudy, oppressive, like the whole city was waiting for something to break. Even inside the office you could feel it. People were quieter than usual, more restless. Glances toward the windows, quick checks of the weather, subtle impatience in the way everyone worked. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened enough to make it feel like evening had come early. Around 5, people started logging off. Chairs rolled back, laptops snapped shut. Quick goodbyes echoed across the room as everyone rushed out, trying to get ahead of the storm before it hit full force. I stayed. Not because I had to, but because I always did. One last check, one more pass through the code, one final push before the weekend. It had become a habit I didn't question anymore. And if I was being honest, I could almost hear Emma's voice in my head reminding me, test it twice before you walk away. So I did. I went through everything again, slower this time, making sure nothing would break overnight. The office grew quieter with each passing minute, until the usual background noise faded into something hollow. By the time I finally leaned back in my chair, it was done. Stable, clean, ready. I packed up slowly, the way you do when there's no rush left, just the leftover fatigue from a long week settling into your shoulders. When I stood and looked around, the space felt completely different. Empty. The rows of desks, the bright overhead lights, the faint hum of the systems still running, it all felt louder without people to soften it. Like the building itself was breathing in the silence. For a moment I just stood there, listening. Then I slung my bag over my shoulder and headed out. As I walked toward the lobby, I could already hear it. The storm. Distant at first, just a low, constant roar, but growing louder with every step until it filled the space around me. And the second I reached the glass doors, it hit all at once. Rain slammed against the windows in heavy sheets, almost blinding. The streetlights outside were distorted into blurred halos, glowing through the water like something unreal. Wind pushed against the doors hard enough to make them tremble slightly in their frames. It was worse than I expected. Much worse. And that's when I noticed. I wasn't the only one still there. Emma was standing near the doors. For a moment, I just watched her without saying anything. She was slightly turned away, her attention fixed on her phone, thumb moving across the screen like she was trying, again and again, to get a response that wasn't coming. The soft glow of the lobby lights reflected off the glass behind her, mixing with the distorted streaks of rain outside. Up close she looked different. Not in a dramatic way, nothing obvious. Just subtle things. The ends of her dark brown hair were damp, a few strands clinging lightly to her neck. There were small drops of rain on her blouse, like she had already stepped outside once and come back in. Her badge still hung around her neck, slightly crooked, like she hadn't bothered to fix it. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired she showed at work, the controlled version hidden behind focus and sharp decisions. This was quieter, real. For a second I hesitated. Then I stepped closer. "Still here?" I asked. She looked up, and the moment she saw me, something in her expression softened. Not completely, but enough that I noticed it. "Yeah," she said, letting out a small breath that sounded more like a sigh. "My car, in the shop. Transmission decided to give up at the worst possible time." She glanced back down at her phone, then shook her head slightly. "I've been trying to find a ride, but no one's answering. And ride shares," she trailed off, giving a small, tired laugh. "They're a mess right now." I nodded, glancing at the storm outside again. That made sense. No one wanted to be out in that. I shifted my bag on my shoulder, thinking for half a second, maybe less, before pulling my keys out of my pocket and holding them up. "My car downstairs," I said. "I can take you." She looked at the keys, then back at me. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to feel like she was weighing something more than just the offer itself. "You sure?" she asked. "I don't want to make your night more complicated." "It won't," I said, maybe a little too quickly. Then softer, "Honestly, if I go home right now, I'll probably just open my laptop again." That earned a small smile. Faint but real. "Let me at least feel useful," I added. She studied me for another second, like she was deciding whether to accept, not just the ride, but something else she hadn't put into words. Then she nodded. "All right," she said, "deal." And just like that, something shifted again, quiet, almost invisible. "But there." "Ready?" I asked, glancing toward the doors as another wave of rain slammed against the glass. Emma let out a small breath, tucking her phone into her pocket. "As I'll ever be." We didn't hesitate after that. The moment the doors opened, the storm hit us full force, cold rain, sharp wind, the kind that soaks through clothes in seconds. We ran without thinking, laughing instinctively as we dodged puddles that were impossible to avoid. It didn't help much. By the time we reached the parking garage, our shoes were already wet, and drops of water clung to our sleeves and hair. Emma brushed a strand of damp hair away from her face, shaking her head slightly. "Okay," she said, catching her breath. "That was a bad idea." I laughed, unlocking my car. Too late now. My Honda sat in its usual spot, faded blue, a little worn down, with a dent on one side that I never got around to fixing. It wasn't impressive, but it was reliable. That counted for something. Emma slid into the passenger seat, pulling the door shut behind her as the rain continued to echo loudly against the roof. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then I turned the key. The engine came to life, and a moment later, I switched on the heater. Warm air slowly began to push back against the chill we had carried in with us. The windshield wipers started their steady rhythm, cutting through the water just enough to make the world outside visible again. It felt contained. like we had stepped out of the storm, even though it was still all around us. I pulled out of the garage carefully, headlights catching the glossy surface of the road. The city had slowed down, cars moving cautiously, lights stretching and blurring across the wet pavement. Inside the car, everything was quiet. Soft music played low in the background, barely noticeable, but enough to fill the silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, the easy kind. The kind that doesn't need to be forced into conversation. I felt my shoulders relax without realizing it. The tension from the week, the noise of the office, the constant pressure, it all started to slip away, little by little, replaced by something calmer. Something simpler. Thanks again, Emma said after a while, her voice softer now. Feels like I keep pulling you into things that aren't your problem. I glanced at her briefly before looking back at the road. You pulled me out for tacos that one time, I said. That counts as saving my social life. She let out a quiet laugh, leaning her head back slightly against the seat. You make a pretty good sidekick, Alex. I smirked a little. Sidekick, that's rough. Her smile lingered longer this time. Maybe not just a sidekick, she said. The words were light. But they didn't feel casual. Not really. And for a moment, the quiet inside the car felt different. Heavier. Not uncomfortable, just noticeable. Like something was starting to take shape between us, even if neither of us was ready to name it yet. Outside, the storm kept moving. But inside the car, everything had slowed down. By the time we reached her neighborhood, the storm had only gotten worse. The rain was heavier now, almost blinding under the streetlights, and the wind pushed hard against the car as I turned onto her street. Water rushed along the curbs, overflowing in places, turning the road into a series of shallow streams. I slowed down, focusing on the narrow stretch ahead. There, Emma said softly, pointing toward a small house just up the road. I pulled up in front of it, a modest beige place with a small porch. The light above the door glowed warmly through the rain, standing in contrast to everything dark and chaotic outside. For a moment, neither of us moved. The engine idled, the wipers kept moving. Rain tapped steadily against the windshield, filling the silence. Emma looked out at the storm, then back at me. You really think it's a good idea to drive back in this? She asked. I shrugged lightly. I'll be fine. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she kept watching the rain, her expression thoughtful, like she was weighing something again, just like in the lobby. Then, slowly, she turned back to me. If you're not in a rush, she began, hesitating just slightly, you could come in for dinner, I have pasta. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, I said immediately, sure. The answer came out before my brain had a chance to catch up. Something about that made her smile, small but genuine. All right, she said, reaching for the door handle. Let's go before it gets worse. We stepped out into the rain again, moving quickly toward the house. The cold hit instantly, soaking through what little dryness we had left, but it didn't matter. By the time we reached the porch, we were both laughing again, half because of the situation, half because there was nothing else to do. Inside, everything changed. The door closed behind us, and the storm was suddenly muted, reduced to a distant, steady sound against the walls. Warmth wrapped around the room, soft and immediate, carrying the faint scent of something clean and familiar. Her house felt lived in. Not staged, not perfect. Real. Soft lighting filled the space instead of the harsh brightness of the office. Books lined the shelves, plants filled the corners, and small details, pictures, scattered items, things that had clearly been used and moved and touched, made it feel personal in a way I hadn't expected. Give me a second, she said, already moving down the hall. You're not staying in wet clothes. She came back with a t-shirt, handing it to me without hesitation. Bathroom's there, she added. I nodded, taking it, still quietly taking everything in. A few minutes later, dry and a little warmer, I stepped into the kitchen to find her already moving around like she had switched into a completely different mode. Hope you don't mind helping, she said, glancing over her shoulder. Not at all. She handed me a knife and pointed to a cutting board. Then you're on chopping duty. We worked side by side, close enough that we kept accidentally bumping into each other. Each time it earned a quiet laugh or a quick apology that didn't really feel necessary. The space between us felt easy. No pressure, no roles. Just two people in a kitchen, moving around each other like it was something we'd done before. The smell of garlic filled the air as the pasta cooked, warm and familiar. Outside, the rain continued to fall, steady and constant, but inside, everything felt calm. We ate by the window, watching water trail down the glass in slow, uneven lines. The conversation drifted naturally. From work to stories from before the job to things we didn't usually talk about in the office. Old memories, small details, pieces of ourselves that didn't fit into meeting rooms or deadlines. Time passed without either of us noticing. And for the first time in a long while, nothing felt rushed. By the time we finished eating, it was late. Neither of us had said it out loud, but it was obvious. The kind of late where the day feels fully closed, where the outside world fades into the background and everything slows down without asking permission. We cleaned up together without thinking about it, passing plates, rinsing dishes, moving around each other in that same quiet rhythm we had found earlier. No rush, no awkwardness. Just ease. When the last dish was set aside, the room fell into a softer kind of silence. The storm was still there. Loud, constant, unrelenting. Rain hit the windows and roof in steady waves, wind pressing against the walls like it had no intention of letting up anytime soon. It filled the space between us, making everything feel a little more contained, a little more private. Emma stepped out of the kitchen first. I followed a second later, wiping my hands dry, and found her standing in the living room. She wasn't doing anything. Just standing there. Her gaze moved briefly toward the front door, then to the couch behind me, the one already made up, and then back again. Like she was tracing the options without saying them out loud. It was subtle. But it wasn't random. She was deciding something. I stayed where I was, not interrupting, not rushing it. After a moment, she exhaled softly and looked at me. "You really shouldn't drive in this," she said. Her voice was calm, but this time it wasn't casual. There was intention behind it. A quiet certainty. "Why don't you just stay here tonight?" There it was again. The question. But this time it felt different. Heavier. Like we both understood it better now. My heart hit harder against my chest, the sound almost drowning out the storm for a second. I held her gaze, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that would make this easier to interpret. I didn't find it. Just that same careful expression. Waiting. I nodded once. "I'll stay." The words came out steady. Simple. But the moment they settled between us, something shifted. Not loud, not dramatic. Just enough to be felt. And then, before I could stop myself, before I could think it through, I added, "But I'm not sleeping on the couch." Silence. Real silence this time. The kind that stretches just a little too long. For a second, I wasn't even sure I had said it out loud. But I had. I could feel it hanging there between us, heavier than anything else that had been said all night. The rain outside seemed louder. Sharper. Like the world itself had leaned in to hear what would happen next. Emma didn't move right away. She just looked at me. Really looked. Her eyes searching my face, trying to understand, was I joking? Was I crossing a line? Or was I saying something I couldn't take back? And standing there in that moment, I realized something. There was no taking it back. Emma didn't answer right away. For a moment she just stood there, her eyes fixed on mine, like she was trying to read something deeper than the words I had just said. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but sharp, filled with possibility. "You're not," she began slowly. Her voice was careful now, measured. Like she was testing the meaning before fully stepping into it. My throat suddenly felt dry. I realized how that must have sounded, how easily it could be taken the wrong way. And for half a second I considered just letting the moment hang there, letting it become something bold, something reckless. But that wasn't me. Not yet. I mean, I started quickly, breaking the tension before it could go too far. You take the bed, I'll take the floor, that couch is way too small. I'll wake up feeling like I got hit by a truck. There was a brief pause. Then her lips pressed together, like she was holding something back. And then she laughed. Soft. Real. The kind of laugh that releases everything all at once. The tension, the uncertainty, the weight of the moment, it all dissolved in seconds. She reached down, grabbed a pillow from the couch, and tossed it lightly at my chest. You scared me for a second, she said, shaking her head. I thought you were being very bold. I caught the pillow, feeling the heat rise to my face almost immediately. I'm not that brave, I admitted. Her smile didn't disappear. If anything, it softened. Not yet, she said quietly. So quiet I almost missed it. But I didn't. And something about the way she said it, calm, certain, like it wasn't a question, made my chest tighten all over again. She turned slightly after that, moving toward the couch. Still, she added more lightly, we're not letting you sleep on the floor either. Before I could argue, she pulled the sofa bed open, the motion practiced and easy. Sheets were straightened, a blanket tossed across the top, everything arranged with the same quiet efficiency she had at work. I stepped in to help without being asked. We worked side by side again, just like in the kitchen, only this time it felt different. Closer. There were no screens, no desks, no roles to hide behind. Just warm light filling the room. Soft music playing somewhere in the background. And the steady sound of rain wrapping around the house, like a constant reminder of how we got here. When we finished, she stepped back slightly, looking at the setup, then at me. You sure you're okay out here? She asked. I can take the couch. I'm good, I said, meeting her eyes. This is already more than I expected tonight. She held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then nodded. Okay. She turned and walked toward the hallway, pausing briefly before disappearing from view. I'll grab you an extra blanket, she called back. It gets cold when it rains like this. Left alone for a moment, I stood there holding the pillow, listening to the storm, replaying everything that had just happened. The words. Her reaction. That quiet not yet. And for the first time that night, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just a simple favor anymore. It hadn't been for a while. I sat down slowly on the edge of the pull-out bed, the mattress dipping slightly under my weight. For a moment, I didn't move. Didn't reach for my phone, didn't turn off the light, didn't even lie down. I just listened. The storm hadn't calmed at all. Rain continued to strike the roof in steady waves, the sound constant and heavy, like it filled every corner of the house. Occasionally, the wind pushed harder, making the walls creak softly, reminding me how fragile everything outside really was. But inside felt completely different. Still, warm, safe. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair, trying to make sense of the shift I could feel but couldn't quite explain. This was the same woman. The same Emma who led meetings without hesitation, who handled pressure like it was routine, who always seemed one step ahead of everyone else. But here in this soft light, without the office around us, she felt closer. More humans. More reals. Like I was seeing a version of her that no one else did. Footsteps broke the silence. I looked up just as she walked back into the room, a folded blanket in her hands. She moved a little slower now, more relaxed, like the urgency of the day had finally worn off. Here, she said, gently placing the blanket at the foot of the bed. Thanks. She nodded but didn't leave right away. Instead, she lingered. Just for a second. Like there was something else on her mind, something she hadn't decided whether to say yet. If you need anything, she added, her voice softer now, just knock. I'm right down the hall. Got it. Another pause. Then, Alex. There was something different in the way she said my name, quieter, more intentional. I looked up. Yes. She hesitated just briefly. Then said, thank you for tonight, it's been a long week. There was honesty in that, the kind she didn't usually show at work. "You're not alone," I replied. "Not at work, not now." The words came out naturally, but the moment they landed, I felt the weight of them. Because I meant them. She held my gaze. And for a second, everything stilled again. The storm, the room, the space between us. Her expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. Not guarded. Not careful. Just real. Then she smiled. Smiled warm. And stepped back, reaching for the light switch. "Good night," she said, leaving a small lamp on instead of turning everything off. "Good night." The room dimmed, shadows settling into the corners as she disappeared down the hallway. I lay back slowly, staring up at the ceiling. And just like that, the quiet returned. But it wasn't empty. My mind replayed everything, the drive, the kitchen, the way she had looked at me when I said I'd stay. The way her voice softened when she said my name. I told myself it was simple. Practical. Bad weather, a spare bed, nothing more. But even as the thought formed, I knew it wasn't true. Something had changed. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But enough. Enough that I could feel it settling somewhere deeper, somewhere that wouldn't go back to how it was before. Outside, the rain continued, steady and endless. Inside, the house creaked softly with the wind. And somewhere down the hall, she was there. That thought stayed with me longer than anything else. And eventually, without realizing when, I fell asleep to the sound of the storm and the quiet weight of everything that had begun to shift. I woke up to silence. Not complete silence, but the kind that feels almost unfamiliar after a night like that. The storm was gone. No pounding rain, no restless wind pressing against the walls. Just quiet. Soft, natural light filtered into the room, slipping through the curtains in pale streaks. For a moment I didn't move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the calm settle in. Then it hit me. I wasn't home. The memory of the night before came back slowly at first, then all at once. The office, the storm, the drive. Dinner. Her. I sat up, running a hand over my face, exhaling as everything settled into place. It hadn't been a dream, none of it. And yet, in the stillness of the morning, it almost felt like one. I swung my legs off the bed and stood, stretching slightly. The house was quiet but not empty. There was a faint sound coming from somewhere down the hall, movement, soft and steady. She was awake. I hesitated for half a second, then stepped out. The hallway was filled with the soft glow of morning light, warmer than the night before. The house felt different now, less intimate in a way, like daylight had quietly reintroduced the world outside. When I reached the kitchen, I found her there. Emma stood by the counter, back turned slightly, pouring coffee into 2 mugs like it was something she did every morning. She was dressed simply now, comfortable, relaxed, nothing like the version of her from the office. She glanced up as I stepped in. And smiled. Morning. There was no hesitation in it. No awkwardness. Just a normal. Morning, I replied, stepping closer. She slid one of the mugs across the counter toward me without asking. I wasn't sure how you take it, she said, so I guessed. I looked down at it, then back at her. Let's see how good your instincts are. She leaned slightly against the counter, watching as I took a sip. I paused, then nodded. Yeah, that's actually perfect. That earned a small, satisfied smile. I'm good at reading people, she said lightly. I almost said something back, something sarcastic, something easy, but the words didn't come out. Because for a second, I wasn't sure if she was joking. Or not. The moment lingered just long enough to be noticed. Then she pushed off the counter slightly, breaking it. I made extra, she said, gesturing toward the stove, if you're hungry. I could eat. We moved around each other again, quieter this time, not uncomfortable but more aware. Like the night before hadn't disappeared. It had just settled. Everything felt normal on the surface. Coffee, breakfast, morning light. But underneath, there was something new. Unspoken. and neither of us seemed ready to be the first to say it out loud. Breakfast was simple. Eggs, toast, coffee, nothing special, but the way it felt made it different. We moved around the kitchen in an easy rhythm, like the night before hadn't ended, just softened into something quieter. Small comments, light exchanges, the kind of conversation that doesn't need effort. But underneath it, something had changed. I could feel it in the pauses. In the way our eyes met just a second longer than necessary before one of us looked away. In the way neither of us mentioned what the night had meant, even though it was there, sitting between us the entire time. After we finished, I helped clean up again. It felt natural now, expected even. When the last dish was done, the moment we'd been avoiding finally arrived. I checked my phone. A few notifications, nothing urgent. The world was still there, waiting. I should probably head out, I said. The words felt heavier than they should have. Emma nodded, but not immediately. Yeah, she replied, quieter than before, you probably should. There was no argument in it. No attempt to stop me. Just acknowledgement. Still, neither of us moved right away. She leaned lightly against the counter, arms crossed, not closed off, just holding something in place. I stood across from her, keys in my hand, not quite ready to walk away. It would have been easy to keep things simple. To treat it like exactly what it looked like on the surface. A storm, a late night, a place to stay. A one-time thing. Something practical. But it didn't feel like that. Not even close. Emma, I started. She looked up. And for a second, I thought I might actually say it. Whatever it was. That something had shifted. That I felt it. That I didn't want to just walk out and pretend none of it mattered. But the words stopped before they fully formed. Because the moment I tried to define it, it became real. And real meant complicated. Instead, I exhaled lightly and shook my head. Thanks, I said, for everything. It wasn't enough. We both knew it. But it was safe. Her expression softened just slightly. Anytime, she replied. That word lingered. Anytime. Like an open door neither of us fully stepped through. I nodded once, then turned toward the door. Each step felt heavier than it should have. I reached for the handle, pausing just briefly before opening it. Alex. I stopped. Turned back. She hadn't moved from where she stood, but something in her expression had changed. Less guarded, more certain. See you Monday, she said. It sounded normal. Professional. Like a reset. But the way she held my gaze told a different story. Yes, I replied, Monday. I stepped outside. The air was fresh, washed clean by the storm. The sky had cleared, leaving everything brighter, sharper than before. It should have felt like a clean break. A return to normal. But as I walked to my car, one thought stayed with me. There was no going back to normal. Not anymore. Monday came faster than it should have. The weekend passed in a blur. I told myself I'd use the time to reset, to clear my head, to put everything back into its proper place. I kept busy, filled the hours with small tasks, distractions, anything that would stop my mind from circling back to that night. It didn't work. Every quiet moment pulled me right back. The kitchen, the rain, the way she said my name. That quiet not yet. By Sunday night, I had already accepted the truth. Nothing about this was simple anymore. And Monday. Monday was going to prove it. The office looked exactly the same. Same desks, same lighting, same low hum of conversations and keyboards filling the space. People moved around like nothing had changed, because for them nothing had. But for me, everything felt slightly off. Sharper, more noticeable. I walked in, trying to act normal, telling myself to just treat it like any other day. Work, focus, routine. Simple. It lasted about 10 seconds. Because the moment I stepped fully into the room, I saw her. Emma stood near the glass wall of the conference room, talking to someone from the team. Laptop in one hand, coffee in the other. Calm, focused, completely in control. Exactly the way she always was. If someone had looked at her right then, they would have seen nothing unusual. No sign of Friday night. No hint of anything personal. Just the same composed, confident version of her that everyone respected. For a second, I wondered if I had imagined it all. If maybe to her it had just been practical. A storm, a guest, nothing more. Then, she looked up and saw me. It was quick, subtle enough that no one else would notice. But I did. The smallest pause. A shift in her expression, barely there but real. And then, that same look. The one from the kitchen. From the living room. From every moment where things almost became something else. It was gone just as fast. Replaced by professionalism. Control. Distance. But it had been there. Which meant one thing. She felt it too. Alex, she said, her tone completely even. Good you're here, can you join us for a minute? Like nothing had happened. Like everything was normal. I nodded once. Yeah, of course. And just like that, we stepped right back into our roles. But this time, they didn't fit the same way anymore. The meeting was normal. Painfully normal. Deadlines, updates, minor issues that needed attention. The kind of conversation I had been part of dozens of times before without thinking twice. And yet, this time every second of it felt different. I sat across from her, laptop open, eyes on the screen, but my focus wasn't really there. It kept drifting. To her voice. To the way she spoke, clear, confident, controlled. Giving direction, asking questions, keeping everything moving forward like she always did. Like Friday night had never happened. Like we hadn't stood in her kitchen, inches apart, laughing over nothing. Like she hadn't looked at me the way she did. I forced myself to concentrate. Took notes, nodded at the right moments, added input when it was expected. From the outside, I knew I looked exactly the same. But inside, nothing matched. At one point, she asked me a direct question. Alex, can you walk us through the deployment timeline? Her tone was steady, professional. Neutral. I looked up, meeting her eyes. For a split second, everything else disappeared. The room, the people, the conversation. Just that look. And there it was again. That flicker. Gone almost immediately, but not before I caught it. I answered the question, my voice even controlled. Yeah, we're on track for Thursday. I ran additional checks Friday evening, everything's stable. A small detail. A normal update. But the second the words Friday evening left my mouth, something shifted. Not in the room. No one else reacted. But she did. Just slightly. Her gaze held mine for a fraction, longer than it should have. Not enough for anyone else to notice. More than enough for me. Then she nodded once, looking back down at her screen. Good, she said, that's what I wanted to hear. And just like that, the moment was gone. Buried under work again. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Chairs moved, conversations picked up. People filtered out of the room, already shifting their attention to the next task, the next deadline. I closed my laptop slowly, not in a rush to leave. Neither was she. By the time I stood up, most of the room had cleared. Just a few people left. Then fewer. And then, it was just us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She gathered her things precise as always, calm, focused. But I could see it now. The slight delay in her movements. The way her attention wasn't fully on what she was doing. She felt it too. Alex, she said finally, not looking up yet. Yes. Another brief pause. Then she closed her laptop and met my eyes. Walk with me. Not a question. A decision. My grip tightened slightly on the edge of the table for half a second before I let go. Okay. And just like that, whatever we had been avoiding since Friday was about to catch up with us. We walked out of the conference room side by side. Not too close. Not too far. Just enough space to look normal. Anyone watching wouldn't think twice about it. Manager and employee continuing a discussion after a meeting. It happened all the time. But this wasn't that. I could feel it in the silence between us. In the way neither of us rushed to fill it. She led the way down the hallway, her pace steady, controlled like always. But there was something underneath it now, something tighter. More deliberate. We passed rows of desks, people focused on their screens, conversations blending into the usual background noise. The office moved around us like nothing had changed. Like everything was still exactly where it should be. But the further we walked, the quieter it became. Until she stopped. A smaller room, empty. She stepped inside without hesitation. I followed. The door closed behind us with a soft click. And just like that, the noise was gone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She stood near the table, one hand resting lightly against its edge, the other still holding her laptop. I stayed closer to the door, like I wasn't sure yet how far into this I was supposed to step. The space between us felt intentional now. Measured. Careful. Emma exhaled slowly, setting the laptop down. Then she looked at me. Not like she had in the meeting. Not controlled, not distant. This was different. Friday, she said. Just one word. But it carried everything. I nodded once, yeah. Another pause. Longer this time. We should talk about it, she added. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Not uncertainty. Not exactly. More-like awareness. Of what it meant. Of what it could become. Probably, I said. Neither of us moved closer. Neither of us stepped back. We just stood there, holding that line between us again. Only now, we both knew it had already been crossed. I don't want this to complicate things, she said carefully. At work. There it was. The reality. The boundary. I let out a quiet breath, nodding slightly. Yeah, I get that. And I did. On paper, it was simple. Clear roles, clear expectations, no room for anything personal. But reality didn't feel that clean anymore. Because Friday hadn't been nothing. And we both knew it. Her gaze stayed on mine, searching. For now, she continued, choosing her words, we keep things the same here, professional, clear. A pause. Then softer. And we don't pretend it didn't happen. That landed differently. Not a rejection. Not a dismissal. Something in between. I felt my chest tighten slightly, but I nodded again. Okay. It was the only answer that made sense. The only safe one. But it didn't feel like the end of the conversation. Not even close. Because the moment the agreement settled between us, the air shifted again. Quieter. Heavier. Like something else was still there. Unsaid. And waiting.